I'm TJ Walker in New York for the Daily National. In the news, debate about top tax rates. Paul Krugman suggested in his columns in the New York Times that we shouldn't think about tax rates being permanently capped at what they were in the 1990s, because so much of the current debate the last few months, the last few years has been about, can we just go back to the 1990s? Under Clinton, the top marginal tax rate was 39%. Krugman is saying, why limit it there? Why not make it a lot higher? Historically, it's been much higher for top income earners. Now, normally, I think that Krugman is unassailable. He's been basically right on everything in the last 4 years, whereas people like Larry Summers and certainly every conservative columnist has been wrong, wrong, wrong. So I don't cross Paul Krugman very easily, but I do want to give some thought to this idea of raising top marginal tax rates to something dramatically beyond 39%. I think we can and should go back to 39%, but here's the real problem with just saying it should be 50 or 60 or 70%. It creates such a backlash among the super wealthy. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but the only reason Ronald Reagan ever got into politics was that in 1945, he'd signed a $1 million a year contract with a movie studio, and his tax rate was 94%. This made him go berserk. And frankly, I think I have some sympathy for him there. I mean, Reagan reasoned that he may only have a few good years at a salary like that. It turns out it was true. He never got another salary payday like that till after he was president. But when it came to his movie star days, it was a small, limited window, and he was taxed at 94%. This motivated to get him into politics, and you know what? Liberals and progressives and people like me have been paying for it ever since. He learned to hate government, hate taxes, hate Democrats, and he'd been a Democrat, all because that top marginal tax rate was so high. So here's my problem with raising taxes too high. It's not that the rich can't pay for it or that it will reduce revenue. That's not my argument at all. I don't buy into any of these conservative arguments that we're somehow punishing the rich. My big problem with raising taxes beyond a certain level is, A, conservatives just, or wealthy Republicans, and they become Republicans, just don't pay it. They spend all of their time creating foundations and offshore accounts and phony charities so that they don't have to pay. So that's my problem, is they just don't pay that much more, number one. Number two, they end up giving so much money to conservatives and Republicans. It's funding our enemies. Because let's face it, most really, really wealthy people are not social conservatives. They're not spending their time bombing abortion clinics and worrying about gay marriage or immigrants, because really wealthy people, for the most part, there are exceptions, have traveled around the world. They've met people from different cultures, different religions, different ideas. For the most part, they're not threatened by that. Most really wealthy people are fairly liberal when it comes to social issues, and yet they give all their money to conservative causes just to lower their top marginal tax rate. Now, really successful entrepreneurs, for the most part, are really smart. You don't get to be a Steve Jobs or a high-tech internet billionaire by being stupid. And yet the Republican Party has become the stupid party that doesn't believe in facts and evolution and global warming. So in my view, most really successful entrepreneurs who are worth 100 million, a billion, they don't naturally align themselves with the Republicans except for one issue, this issue of the top marginal tax rate. Even really wealthy second and third generation kids of industrialists, they might not be smart, but they're generally not social conservatives. Let's face it, if you're really rich and you can spend all your time buying cocaine for your friends, hanging out at nightclubs, buying $500 bottles of champagne, traveling all over the world, that typically doesn't get you too excited about joining a fundamentalist Christian church and abstaining from alcohol. It just doesn't. Most really wealthy people I know, second and third generation, they're never social conservatives, and yet they still align themselves with the Republican Party simply over that issue of taxation and this fear that it's somehow going to go up to 50, 60, 70%. So I ask you, a lot of the liberal and progressive viewers of this video, What do you think the top tax rate should be? Because at some point, whether it's next year or 4 years or 8 years from now, liberal progressive politicians are going to gain power again. They are going to get control of the Congress. They are going to be able to rewrite tax policy. What should it be? What should be the top marginal tax rate? I agree it's too low now. I think the proper tax rate should be something like 39%. But there are a lot of you who think it should be much, much higher. I'd like to know from you, let's start the dialogue right now. What should the top tax rate be? But before you just automatically say, no one needs that, no one needs more than $1 million, so it should be 100% of your second or third million. I want you to really stop and think, are you sure you want to plant the seeds for the future Ronald Reagans and essentially fund all the reactionary politicians out there for the next generation if you make the rate too high? So what rate do you want it to be? I'd like to know. I'm TJ Walker in New York for the Daily National.